respected psychologist Iris Nakamura, was discovered dead in her house. She was well known for her perceptive insight into human nature and compassionate touch. Her body was found on their spotless kitchen floor, unearthed by her husband, tech industry entrepreneur Peter Nakamura. Iris's normally calm face was frozen in an expression of pure terror, her once warm and inviting eyes now vacant. It was a startling sight. Detective Hector Vance, an experienced officer with a track record of cracking even the most difficult cases, led the investigation with speed. Vance's keen intuition informed him that this was no typical demise. The cause of death remained unknown after the initial examination turned up no clear evidence of trauma or struggle. However, Vance's experience showed him that often the truth was concealed. At first, Peter Nakamura's sorrow was evident to everyone around him. "Friends, sorry to interrupt, but please help me reach 1,100 subscribers by the end of the summer. I will be very pleased. Let's keep going." But as the investigation went on, contradictions in his account started to surface. With a methodical approach, Vance delved further into Peter's life and discovered a complex network of lies and secrets. Despite appearing flawless on the outside, the couple's marriage was anything but. Friends and acquaintances described a relationship that was tense due to distrust and jealousy. Iris had noticed that Peter was missing a lot of work and had late nights frequently. She was beginning to doubt her husband's loyalty. During a house search, Iris's diary was found, revealing her growing paranoia and her fear that Peter was having an affair. When Iris discovered a hidden email account on Peter's laptop and saw explicit messages exchanged between him and a woman named Lena Volkov, her suspicions were validated. Lena was a software developer for Peter's company and an incredibly intelligent and attractive woman. The emails described not only a sexual relationship, but also an emotional bond that Iris believed she would never be able to match. Beyond just an affair, Detective Vance's investigation into Lena Volkov turned up more information. It turned out that Lena was prone to manipulation and had a history of unstable relationships. She was characterized by coworkers as charming but cunning, prepared to go to any lengths to achieve her goals. Vance had a gut feeling that Lena was more than just a mistress. Rather, she was the driving force behind this tragic tale. Forensic entomology was an unexpected source of the case's breakthrough. To examine insect activity on Iris's body, the investigation team had enlisted the assistance of forensic entomologist Dr. Maria Hernandez. The results of Dr. Hernandez were frightening. Peter's timeline was contradicted by the presence of specific insects, which suggested that Iris had been dead for several hours before her body was found. This realization put Peter and Lena front and center. When the puzzle pieces started to come together, Vance and his group discovered a vile scheme. Iris's death was a well-planned murder, rather than an accident. Peter and Lena had plotted Iris's murder because they thought it would allow them to be together without the burden of a contentious divorce. Even though they had painstakingly planned every aspect of their crime, they were ultimately brought down by insects that flourished in the shadow of their transgression. The method of Iris's murder was also discovered during the inquiry. Iris was given the rare and potent toxin that Peter and Lena had obtained through her morning tea. Peter was able to keep up his act of innocence right up until the very end because the toxin caused a slow and agonizing death that was nearly imperceptible through conventional toxicology testing. The extent of Peter and Lena's deceit became more and more evident as the case against them developed. A damning picture of their collusion was painted by witness interviews and forensic evidence. The community was rocked by a scandal that involved a once-respected businessman and his crafty accomplice. Iris finally received justice, thanks to Detective Vance's meticulous approach and unwavering determination. The trial that was to come promised to reveal the fatal results of obsession and betrayal, exposing the seedy underbelly of a seemingly perfect marriage. Peter Nakamura and Lena Volkov's trial generated a lot of media attention and a great deal of public interest. People were enthralled with the tale of an apparently ideal marriage that had gone terribly wrong, with murder and betrayal at its center. Journalists crowded the courtroom, eager to document every startling discovery. Throughout the trial, Peter Nakamura insisted on his innocence and presented himself as a distraught spouse who had been falsely accused. He brought in Jonathan Everhart, a top defense lawyer in the nation renowned for his ability to persuade juries with his compelling stories and astute legal mind. Conversely, Lena Volkov made a different decision. She made the decision to assist the prosecution in exchange for a lighter sentence after being presented with overwhelming evidence. District Attorney Carla Mendez led the prosecution, and she put forth a well-thought-out case. They gave a rundown of what happened and showed how Peter and Lena had planned to kill Iris. Lena and Peter exchanged revealing emails and messages that exposed their close relationship and their talks about getting rid of Iris. Peter's story was further undermined by the forensic entomology findings, which offered indisputable evidence that Iris had passed away long before he claimed to have discovered her body. When Dr. Maria Hernandez took the stand, the trial had one of its most dramatic moments. She went into great detail about how the presence of insects on Iris's body had produced important evidence for the case. Her evidence was convincing and scientific, and it helped the jury see how unrealistic the timeline Peter had given was. Peter's alibi crumbled when he discovered particular insect larvae, which suggested that Iris had passed away several hours before he had phoned the police. Lena's statement was yet another crucial point. She gave a terrifying account of how she and Peter had plotted Iris's death. She spoke in a cool, almost detached tone, while describing how they had obtained the toxin and given it to Iris in her tea. She described their cold, calculated actions in the moments before Iris's death, and the court listened in stunned silence as she painted a vivid picture of what happened. Lena's willingness to assist the authorities and her acknowledgement of guilt served to strengthen the prosecution's case. Peter's defense strategy centered on painting Lena in an unflattering light, depicting her as a controlling and unstable person who had planned the murder without consulting him. Everhart maintained that Peter was only a victim of Lena's deceit, having been duped and then falsely accused of a crime he had not committed. To cast doubt on the jurors' minds, the defense called witnesses who discussed Lena's volatile nature and her past of problematic relationships. The overwhelming weight of the evidence against Peter overcame Everhart's best efforts. There was minimal room for doubt in the forensic evidence, and the prosecution's case was solid. After only a few hours of deliberation, the jury found both Peter Nakamura and Lena Volkov guilty. The judge's sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole for Peter and a reduced sentence of 25 years for Lena, due to her cooperation, caused the courtroom to erupt in a mix of relief and shock. For everyone involved, the trial's aftermath had a long-lasting effect. The family of Iris, who had been present for the entire trial, expressed a mixed feeling of relief. Justice had been done, but they had lost a beloved sister and daughter. After the scandal rocked the community, it started to heal, but the memory of the crime hung over everyone like a dark shadow. For his efforts on the case, Detective Hector Vance won praise. Iris had received justice thanks to his painstaking method and unwavering search for the truth, which also revealed the extent of the deceit and treachery that had preceded her demise. Still, Vance took little comfort from the recognition. The cold-bloodedness of the crime had haunted him since the case had taken a toll on him. Now that she was serving her time, Lena Volkov discovered that her fellow prisoners avoided her. She was considered a traitor for her cooperation with the authorities, which made her life in prison challenging. In contrast, Peter Nakamura refused to back down and insisted on his innocence despite the possibility of a life sentence behind bars. His own actions had destroyed his once bright future, and now he was left to reflect on his demise in the solitude of his cell. Years passed, but those who had known Iris Nakamura and those who had followed the dramatic trial could not shake the memories of her terrible passing. The once close-knit neighborhood where Iris and Peter had lived turned into a representation of concealed evil, a place where rumors of the ominous happenings that had destroyed their sense of security were whispered. The case was never really closed in Detective Hector Vance's opinion. He felt that there was more to the story, even with all of the praise and recognition. Even though Iris's murder had been solved, the painstaking investigator was unsettled by the layers of deceit he had discovered. He had devoted his life to finding the truth. He found himself going through the case files again and again, looking for any new information or unnoticed details that might shed more light on Peter and Lena's intentions. Peter Nakamura, meanwhile, had turned into a shadow of his former self while incarcerated. His obstinacy had gradually given way to remorse and bitterness. His isolation was eating away at his sanity, and the reality of his life sentence started to weigh heavily on him. He thought about what he had done, the decisions that had brought him to this terrible place, and his crippling obsession with Lena for hours on end. Jonathan Everhart, his defense lawyer, became his lone communication with the outside world through letters. Even after losing in court, Everhart persisted in advocating for Peter, submitting appeals, and looking for any opening that would allow his client's sentence to be lowered. Conversely, Lena Volkov adjusted to her life in prison with a detached pragmatism. Although her cooperation during the trial resulted in a lighter sentence, the other prisoners saw her as a traitor. Always the fighter, Lena made her way through the harsh realities of prison life with wit and cunning. With the harsh surroundings hardening her once sharp beauty, she made alliances when she could and maintained a low profile. She had no illusions about what lay ahead for her. But unlike Peter, she faced her fate head-on with a steely determination. Life continued slowly outside the prison walls. Once a picture of prosperity and happiness, the Nakamura residence was unsold, its windows boarded up, and its garden overgrown. It was a place where neighbors no longer let their kids play, a haunting reminder of the tragedy. Every member of the community carried a personal burden from the past as they tried to move on. Elena, the sister of Iris, was one person who managed to find some measure of calm. Being Iris's closest confidant, she was aware of her sister's mounting worries and misgivings. Elena had been a constant throughout the trial, her anguish and rage evident. She turned her suffering after the decision into a constructive endeavor by founding the Iris Nakamura Foundation to assist those who have experienced adultery and domestic abuse. The organization, which offers assistance and resources to people in circumstances comparable to Iris, came to be seen by many as a ray of hope. Elena's work transformed her grief into a positive energy and assisted in her healing. Elena made the decision to plan a memorial service as the 10th anniversary of Iris's passing drew near, inviting friends, family, and neighbors to honor Iris and spread the word about the foundation's mission. The location of the event was a quiet park far from the Nakamura residence, where the natural beauty stood in stark contrast to the tragedy that was being remembered. Among the guests was Detective Vance, who was seated quietly in the back of the group. He felt the sense of closure he had long sought upon witnessing the impact of Iris's life and the strength of her sister's resolve. He had been consumed by the case for years, But seeing the good legacy that had come out of the shadows gave him a newfound sense of direction. Elena spoke at the memorial about Iris's generosity, her commitment to her job, and her love for her family. She talked about how crucial it is to spot relationship problems early on, and how urgent it is to get support. Many people in attendance, many of whom had been impacted by the Foundation's work, found great resonance in her remarks. Elena came up to Detective Vance just as the sun was setting, and everyone had left. They said a few words to each other, realizing the unspoken bond that grew out of their relationship with Iris. Vance expressed his gratitude to Elena for her perseverance and strength, as he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. As the evening came to an end, the park was once again peaceful. The cool evening air carried the memory of Iris Nakamura, a reminder that even in the face of unfathomable tragedy, the human spirit was capable of persevering and turning suffering into a source of hope for others. The tale of Iris, Peter, and Lena turned into a warning tale that was ingrained in the community and served as a constant reminder to everyone involved of the precarious balance that must be struck between love, obsession, and the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface. In the years that followed the memorial service, the community underwent a gradual but noticeable change. The Iris Nakamura Foundation experienced rapid growth, broadening its scope and influence. Elena Nakamura devoted her life to the cause, motivated by the memory of her sister. The organization offered educational programs to support wholesome relationships and mental health, in addition to resources for victims of adultery and domestic abuse. A few years after the memorial, Detective Hector Vance announced his retirement from the force. He took comfort in imparting his wealth of experience and emphasizing the value of careful research and empathy to aspiring detectives. The mentorship program at Vance became well known for turning out some of the department's most kind and capable officers. Even after retiring, Vance continued to uphold Iris's legacy in silence, offering advice on rare occasions regarding especially difficult cases and consistently instilling in his mentees the lessons learned from the Nakamura case. The appeals of Peter Nakamura were consistently rejected. The formerly well-known businessman vanished into obscurity as his name became associated with murder and betrayal. Peter was still thinking back on what he had done while he was incarcerated, his days filled with a dull routine and a deep regret. Over time, Jonathan Everhart, his devoted but ultimately unsatisfactory lawyer, stopped writing him letters. As Peter's seclusion increased, he developed into a tragically ironic figure who was intelligent but flawed by his own decisions. After serving her reduced sentence for 15 years, Lena Volkov was granted her release from prison. She had changed from the inside out. Her once perceptive mind was now preoccupied with getting by in the outside world. Although the media took notice of her release, Lena made the decision to fade from view and relocate to a small, unremarkable town, far from her background. She worked at a nearby library and led a quiet life there, finding some solace in the daily grind of existence. Lena carried the consequences of her actions with her, a continual reminder of the darkness she had accepted, and she never forgot the events that led to Iris's death. The impact of Elena Nakamura's ceaseless efforts with the Foundation is still being felt. She rose to prominence as a champion for victims' rights and received invitations to give speeches at numerous international gatherings. Many were moved to join the cause by her speeches, which were imbued with passion and personal experience. In order to raise awareness and encourage prevention, the Foundation's programs have grown to include support groups, legal aid, and outreach initiatives in workplaces and schools. The community got together once more one spring, on the 15th anniversary of Iris's passing. to celebrate the opening of a brand new community center, made possible by funding from the Iris Nakamura Foundation. The center included counseling rooms, legal aid offices, and spaces for educational workshops, all in an effort to provide a safe haven for those in need. It served as evidence of Iris's lasting legacy and the community's dedication to recovery and assistance. Now, completely retired, Detective Vance was present at the opening ceremony. He looked on proudly as Elena cut the ribbon, her mission accomplished, her face beaming. Vance thought back to the path they had all traveled since that fateful day, the suffering and tenacity that had led them to this point. Knowing that Iris's death had not been in vain and had instead spurred a movement that saved countless lives, gave him a great sense of satisfaction. Elena came up to Vance as the ceremony was coming to an end. They had a silent moment of contemplation, during which they acknowledged the weight of the past, but let it go. Elena expressed her gratitude to Vance for his unwavering commitment and never-ending pursuit of justice for her sister. Vance responded by expressing his respect for Elena's fortitude and her capacity to use tragedy as a driving force for good. The neighborhood's new community center swiftly rose to prominence. Its services and programs offered much-needed support, and its very existence acted as a ray of hope for those who were suffering in quiet. Iris Nakamura's story, which was originally one of heartbreak and treachery, has been transformed into one of resiliency and optimism. The past events had a lasting impact on the community, which welcomed a future characterized by empathy and consciousness. Iris's legacy, a monument to the enduring power of love and the ability of the human spirit to heal and grow, gradually eclipsed the shadows of her tragic end. And so a new era of healing, hope, and an unwavering commitment to protect and support those in need began in a town that had once been shattered by darkness. Iris Nakamura's memory endured not as a victim, but as a force for good, showing everyone that even the most severe injuries can result in the most significant metamorphoses.